Hi guys, tonight let's take a journey back in time, right into the itchy, scratchy secrets of ancient bedrooms. You might be surprised how people in castles, cottages, and huts all had to share their beds, not just with family, but with an army of tiny, hungry creatures. Ever wondered why ancient beds were crawling with bugs, what people did about it, and how it actually felt to drift off to sleep with something scuttling nearby? Get comfortable, because this is a story about how sleep used to be a battle, and why beds were so much more alive than you'd ever imagine. But before we begin, if you're someone who loves slow, curious dives into forgotten worlds, tap the like button, subscribe, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to get to know my viewers better. In the quiet, shadowy rooms of the ancient world, the day ended not with the gentle sigh of clean sheets, but with the sound of straw rustling and the gentle tickle of tiny legs. For most of human history, a bed was a place where the living and the crawling shared space, especially once darkness fell. Unlike the neat, sealed bedrooms of today, ancient sleeping places were wide open to the outdoors. Wind, dust, and the entire ecosystem came in through cracks in the walls and roof. Sometimes, a sleeping place was no more than a pile of straw in a corner, or a mattress stuffed with dry grass, feathers, or even seaweed. Each material a miniature world for bugs, fleas, lice, and even bigger creatures to thrive. In medieval Europe, for example, a typical bed in a peasant's cottage wasn't even a proper frame, just a sack of straw replaced when it got too dirty, which wasn't often. The straw would break down, flatten, and eventually become home to all kinds of insects, from harmless beetles to biting fleas. People quickly learned to live with the constant itching and biting, scratching in their sleep, sometimes waking to mysterious red spots on their skin. In wealthier homes, beds were more elaborate, with wooden frames and thick mattresses, often filled with feathers. But feathers brought their own problems. Mites and tiny bugs loved to burrow into the down, laying eggs that would hatch under the warmth of a sleeping body. Some people tried stuffing mattresses with aromatic herbs, hoping the smell would chase the bugs away, but the effect was temporary. Even kings and queens would wake up scratching sometimes. Before the invention of modern cleaning, bugs had the upper hand. The cracks in wooden floors and beams provided perfect hiding places for bedbugs, who could live for months without food and come crawling out at night. Imagine lying down after a long day, the fire burning low as the darkness presses in. The quiet is never complete. You can always hear the faint movement of small creatures finding their way through straw and fabric. Over time, people developed small tricks to deal with the pests. Hanging bedding outside in the sun was one, letting the heat drive out some of the bugs, though not all. Some folks even sprinkled ashes or fine sand into their bedding, hoping to scratch up the bugs' shells and make life uncomfortable for them. But nothing ever fully solved the problem. Even children learned to check their beds before sleep, patting the straw or shaking out a blanket before crawling in, knowing full well it was a losing battle. So as we settle in tonight, with our modern comforts and sealed mattresses, it's hard to imagine just how much company ancient sleepers had. But for our ancestors, sharing their beds with bugs was simply part of life. A nightly reminder that the world, even indoors, was always buzzing with unseen life. In the earliest times, the idea of a bed was nothing like what we picture today. Ancient people often slept close to the ground, on woven mats or simple piles of reeds, leaves, or animal skins, whatever could be gathered nearby. These natural materials might have seemed soft at first, but they quickly became havens for all sorts of insects. The earthy smell of dried grass, mixed with the musty scent of old fur, and deep inside the bedding, tiny creatures built their homes. At night, when the air cooled and the world quieted down, bugs stirred in the darkness, searching for warmth or food. Sometimes, people would feel a faint crawling sensation across their skin, a gentle, almost ticklish reminder that they weren't alone. Children would whisper stories about mysterious bugs that came out only after sunset, and parents would murmur calming words, pretending not to notice the real rustling beneath their covers. In hot regions, beds were often placed outside, under simple canopies or trees, to escape the stuffy heat indoors. But this meant even more bugs. Mosquitoes, beetles, and other night visitors joined the household, drawn by the warmth of sleeping bodies. Some families lit small fires nearby or burned bundles of strong-smelling herbs, hoping to drive the insects away with smoke, but the relief was always brief. In colder areas, people huddled together in small, poorly ventilated rooms, sharing their beds with family members and, unavoidably, with bugs. Lice were especially common. They thrived in the seams of clothing and bedding, moving from person to person as easily as a whispered secret. Scratching at itchy bites became part of the nightly routine, a sound that filled the darkness like a soft, restless lullaby. Over time, sleeping arrangements grew more complicated. As villages became towns, and towns grew into cities, more people crowded into smaller spaces. Wealthy families began to build beds raised above the ground, using wooden frames to escape the chill of the earth, and, hopefully, to put a little distance between themselves and the crawling world below. But even the finest beds, carved with care and layered with beautiful fabrics, could not keep out the bugs forever. Bed bugs, with their flat, clever bodies, could hide in the tiniest cracks of a wooden frame, emerging only at night to feed. Their bites left itchy welts, sometimes in neat little lines, as if they had marched in single file across a sleeping body. Mattresses filled with straw or feathers became breeding grounds for fleas and mites, who multiplied quickly in the warmth. People sometimes tried to fight back with homemade remedies, sprinkling vinegar or scattering pungent herbs, brushing out the straw, or even heating bedding over a fire to kill the pests. But the battle was never truly won. For many, sleep was a time of uneasy truce with the bugs, a few hours of rest stolen from a world that never really belonged to humans alone. And so, night after night, people slipped into their beds with a mix of hope and resignation, comforted by each other's presence, even as they scratched and shifted in the dark, sharing the ancient struggle for a peaceful night's sleep. As centuries passed, the designs of beds slowly evolved, but the challenge of sharing sleep with bugs remained stubbornly the same. In ancient Egypt, beds were crafted from wood and sometimes raised on legs, partly in an effort to keep the sleeper away from the dusty floor and its crawling inhabitants. Yet even these elegant constructions were no match for the persistence of bugs. The gaps and joints in wooden frames made perfect hiding spots for bed bugs, who seemed to thrive in the warmth and shadows of the night. People sometimes carved the legs of their beds into elaborate animal shapes, believing that certain figures would scare away evil spirits, or, just maybe, the creatures that nipped at their skin in the dark. Egyptians also stuffed their mattresses with reeds or palm fibers, both plentiful and easy to gather, but these materials only provided more nooks and crannies for insects to settle in. As the warm night air drifted in from the Nile, bringing with it the sounds of frogs and the rustling of reeds, there was also the near certainty of small legs and wings sharing the bed. In other ancient cultures, similar patterns emerged. Greeks and Romans, famous for their innovations in architecture and comfort, enjoyed beds called clenae, frames strung with leather or rope, topped with cushions or mattresses. Wealthier Romans might stuff their mattresses with wool or feathers, layering soft blankets above. But for every step toward luxury, there was a new problem. Wool attracted moths and tiny beetles. Feathers drew mites and fleas. Some families kept cats not just for companionship, but as nighttime sentries against rodents and bugs. Slaves or servants sometimes beat the bedding each evening, trying to chase out the insects, but the effect was always temporary. In the sprawling, noisy cities of Rome or Athens, windows and doors were rarely tightly sealed. Breezes carried in fresh air, but also insects from outside. At night, the flickering light of an oil lamp might reveal the tiniest movements on the mattress or floor, tiny, stubborn reminders that no home was ever truly closed to the natural world. Across Asia, people also battled with bugs in their beds. In China, woven mats of bamboo or reeds provided a cool, firm surface for sleep, especially during hot summers. The smoothness of bamboo was less welcoming to certain pests, but gaps between the slats became easy hiding places for others. Mosquito nets, which eventually became common in some areas, were a simple but effective way to keep out flying insects. Yet the crawling ones, ever determined, still found their way in. Everywhere people learned to accept a certain level of discomfort. It was simply part of life. A mother would calmly pick lice from her child's hair by firelight, or a father might shake out the bedding before sleep, hoping to chase off at least a few of the night's visitors. Generations grew up understanding that bedtime was not just a time for rest, but also a gentle battle, a quiet surrender to a world much busier and much more crowded than it seemed in the darkness. In medieval Europe, the struggle with bed bugs and other pests became a familiar part of daily life, woven into the rhythm of the household. In great manor houses, castles, and even modest cottages, the construction of beds changed, but the challenges remained. Beds were often heavy, carved wooden frames, their posts rising high and draped with curtains. These curtains, though beautiful and practical for warmth and privacy, also created a sheltered world where insects could thrive undisturbed. Dust collected in the folds of thick fabric, and tiny creatures took advantage of the shadows to move unseen. The wealthy layered mattresses stuffed with feathers, wool, or straw atop wooden platforms. The poor made do with sacks filled with chaff or whatever plant material was available. In both cases, beds were rarely cleaned in the way we would expect today. Instead of removing and washing bedding, people might beat it with sticks or hang it in the sun, letting the wind and light do their best to chase out pests. But bedbugs, with their flat bodies and clever hiding skills, easily avoided such efforts. They squeezed into the tiniest cracks in wood, hiding during the day and emerging at night, drawn by the warmth and carbon dioxide of sleeping bodies. Bedbugs fed quickly, leaving itchy red marks behind, and returned to their hiding spots before sunrise. Fleas, too, were an ever-present annoyance. They leaped from person to person, often carried into the house by dogs, cats, or other animals that slept indoors. Lice infested not just bedding, but clothing and hair, moving easily through the close quarters of medieval homes. For families who shared sleeping spaces, these pests were simply part of the background, a minor discomfort compared to the dangers and hardships of daily life. Still, the irritation was real. People scratched in their sleep, waking to find bites on their arms and legs, or discovered fine trails of blood on their sheets in the morning. Remedies were simple, but rarely effective. Scattering dried herbs or flowers with strong scents, hoping to repel the bugs, or boiling sheets and clothes when possible. The water was precious, and washing was hard work. Sometimes, parents made games of it for children, challenging them to find the enemy bugs and shake them from the mattress before bedtime. In the winter, as fires burned low and rooms grew chilly, families huddled together under thick blankets. Body heat was shared, but so were the insects that thrived in warmth. The nights were filled with quiet whispers and the sound of restless shifting. In the flickering light of a candle or the cold glow of the moon, ancient sleepers accepted the simple truth that comfort was always shared, with family, with pets, and with the countless tiny lives that made a home of their beds. This uneasy peace was as old as humanity itself, stretching back through the centuries, connecting each generation through the shared experience of sleep, struggle, and the endless, subtle dance between humans and the unseen creatures of the night. As time went on, even as towns grew into bustling cities and houses became sturdier and more elaborate, the nightly presence of bugs in the bed remained a fact of life. The arrival of new materials for bedding brought both hopes and new challenges. When cotton became more widely available, it was seen as a luxury, a softer, cleaner alternative to straw or feathers. But cotton, like all organic fibers, was still vulnerable to pests. Tiny beetles could chew through the threads, and mites or lice easily found shelter in the dense weave. Families who could afford cotton sheets often treasured them, airing them out in the sun or boiling them to keep pests away. But even the best care couldn't guarantee a pest-free night. In many cultures, sleep was seen as a vulnerable time, when people were exposed not just to insects, but to bad dreams and wandering spirits. Amulets, charms, and carved wooden figures were placed near the bed to ward off invisible dangers. Sometimes, these protective objects were said to work on the bugs as well. Herbs hung from bedposts, or sachets of dried lavender tucked under pillows, believed to repel not only fleas and lice, but also the worries that haunted sleep. Still, the reality was less magical. Every night, as the household settled in, the invisible population of bugs came alive. In crowded homes, several generations might share a single sleeping space, each person bringing their own share of tiny hitchhikers. Blankets were pulled tight, and beds creaked softly as sleepers shifted to find a comfortable position. The quiet was broken only by the occasional slap at a mosquito, or the soft scratching sound that meant someone had been bitten once again. Over time, people adapted to this nightly routine. They learned to spot the telltale signs of an infestation, the tiny black dots left behind by bedbugs, or the white specks of louse eggs hidden in seams. Some became experts at making quick repairs to mattresses and bedding, stitching up holes or patching worn spots to slow the advance of pests. In some places, the arrival of spring was greeted not just with joy, but with the dreaded spring cleaning, a time when everything in the house, especially the beds, was dragged outside for a thorough beating, brushing, and airing. Still, no matter how hard they tried, the bugs always returned. People joked about the household guests that never left, or told stories about mysterious creatures that lived in the shadows and only came out at night. Yet there was also a certain patience in how people handled these nuisances. The world was full of small discomforts, and bugs in the bed were simply one more reminder that life was shared with many unseen neighbors. And so, with each passing year, families found comfort where they could, in a warm blanket, in a familiar room, and in the hope that tonight, at least, the bugs might be a little less bothersome than the night before. The battle against bed bugs and their companions was not just a private affair. Communities developed customs and rituals around keeping sleeping spaces as clean and comfortable as possible. In some villages, neighbors helped each other during cleaning days, carrying mattresses outside to be beaten with sticks and shaken until clouds of dust and sometimes startled insects billowed out. Children laughed and ran around, sometimes turning the event into a game, chasing bugs away or gathering stray feathers that escaped from worn-out bedding. Sunlight was prized as a natural disinfectant. People knew instinctively that strong daylight could drive away dampness and make bedding less inviting to pests. Whole families would hang blankets, sheets, and mats over fences, bushes, or washing lines, letting them air out under the watchful eyes of mothers and grandmothers. The smell of sun-warmed fabric became linked to the hope of a fresh night's sleep. Still, while these efforts offered some relief, the victory was always short-lived. Bugs returned as soon as conditions allowed. In the city, the situation could be even worse. Crowded apartments, shared walls, and close quarters meant that an infestation in one household could quickly spread to neighbors. People whispered about bad houses, where the bugs seemed impossible to control, and worried that an unwelcome visitor might bring new pests with them. At the same time, sleeping arrangements could be surprisingly public. In some cultures, travelers or guests were welcomed into the family bed, a sign of trust and hospitality. But this meant sharing not only warmth, but also any bugs that had come along for the ride. It was not uncommon for a weary traveler to spend the night scratching at unfamiliar bites, only to bring the bugs home with them the next day. Despite all these inconveniences, people learned to adapt. Small habits developed over generations, shaking out clothes before putting them on, checking under pillows, and keeping an eye out for any new signs of infestation. Children were taught to brush their hair regularly and to tell an adult if they felt too itchy at night. Elders shared remedies passed down through families, like dabbing vinegar on bites or rubbing garlic on bed frames. There was a sense that everyone was in it together, that the nightly battle against bugs was a shared story, part of the history of every home. Through all of this, sleep itself remained precious. The comforting weight of a favorite blanket, the soft sounds of loved ones nearby, and the flicker of candlelight created moments of peace that made the nightly discomforts bearable. Even as bugs continued to find their way into beds and bedrooms, people held on to small routines of care and comfort, determined to make the best of the world they lived in, one sleepy, scratchy night at a time. Throughout the centuries, people's understanding of bugs in their beds grew alongside their knowledge of the natural world. What once seemed like a mysterious curse came to be understood as the result of simple biology. Warmth, darkness, and the steady presence of humans created the perfect environment for tiny creatures to thrive. people began to observe patterns. Bugs were more active in damp, crowded spaces. Infestations grew worse after warm, wet seasons. Certain materials, like straw or animal hair, seemed to attract pests faster than others. Observant families learned to rotate bedding materials, swapping out straw for fresh bundles every few weeks, or mixing different types of herbs into mattresses in the hope that some would discourage unwanted visitors. The pursuit of a better night's sleep drove small innovations. Bed frames grew taller, with posts carved in fanciful shapes that, in addition to their decorative purpose, made it harder for crawling insects to reach the sleeper. Some even set the bed legs in bowls of water or oil, a practical trick that created a barrier bugs couldn't cross. While these measures offered some help, there was still no perfect defense. In the dim light before dawn, a mother might quietly pluck a louse from her child's hair, or a father might spot a trail of tiny black dots along the seams of the mattress, signs that the bugs had once again found their way inside. Despite the constant presence of pests, people's attitudes gradually shifted. Rather than living in fear or disgust, many simply accepted bugs as part of the world, no different from the wind, rain, or changing seasons. Some found humor in the situation, spinning tales about mischievous bed bugs who crept into dreams or inventing songs to sing before bed, meant to send the bugs away for the night. In crowded cities, public health campaigns began to appear, teaching people new ways to keep their homes cleaner and limit infestations. Posters might show a smiling family shaking out their bedding, or a stern warning about the dangers of letting garbage pile up near sleeping areas. These efforts, while helpful, could only do so much. The realities of poverty and crowded living meant that, for many, the battle against bugs was always uphill. Yet, amidst all this, moments of comfort still shone through. On cold winter nights, families gathered together under thick quilts, telling stories and sharing warmth. The presence of bugs, while annoying, was rarely enough to keep anyone awake for long. The world outside might be harsh and unpredictable, but inside, the gentle rituals of bedtime, brushing hair, tucking in children, whispering goodnight, created islands of peace that made even the scratchiest bed seem safe for a few precious hours. The sounds of night in the ancient world were different than what we know today. Without the constant hum of electricity, or the distant rumble of passing cars, every small movement seemed louder, more intimate. The gentle creak of a bed frame, the shuffle of straw as someone shifted in their sleep, or the faint patter of tiny legs moving across a blanket, all became part of the night's soundtrack. Sometimes, the scurrying of bugs was joined by the soft snoring of a family member, or the quiet murmur of voices sharing dreams in the dark. For those who lived close to nature, the boundaries between indoors and outdoors were always thin. Windows were often left open to catch a cool breeze, letting in moths, beetles, and the occasional mosquito. In winter, smoke from the fire hung in the air, sometimes driving insects into hiding, but never for long. People grew accustomed to these rhythms. Each night followed a pattern, bedding shaken out, bites checked and soothed, children reassured that the bugs were nothing to fear. Some believed that if you whispered kindly to the creatures, they might leave you alone, an old superstition passed down like a family recipe. These little rituals helped everyone feel safer, even if they did little to stop the nightly parade of tiny invaders. In richer households, servants sometimes took on the chore of debugging the beds. They would use stiff brushes or heavy sticks to beat the mattresses, sending clouds of dust and, with luck, a few bugs out into the air. Linens were hung over lines or bushes in the yard, turned in the sunlight until they felt crisp and clean. Yet even in these homes, the battle was never fully won. Bedbugs could live for months without feeding, hiding in the cracks of ornate headboards or deep inside feather pillows. Sometimes, a guest staying the night would find themselves the unlucky recipient of a bedbug's bite, waking to itchy spots and the realization that even the finest homes could not guarantee perfect comfort. For everyone, rich or poor, bugs in the bed were a nightly companion, a reminder that no matter how carefully one prepared for sleep, the world was always a little more crowded and a little more alive than it seemed at first glance. And so, with patience and gentle humor, people made their peace with the small discomforts of the night, finding solace in the steady breathing of those they loved, and the simple hope that tomorrow's sleep might be just a bit more restful. In the soft quiet of ancient nights, the experience of sharing a bed with bugs became a deeply woven part of daily life, a reality both irritating and oddly familiar. In every village and city, people adjusted to the rhythm of nighttime discomfort. The act of preparing for sleep became an unspoken ritual, one that families performed together, generation after generation. First, the beds would be aired out, bedding shaken and examined in the fading light. Hands checked the seams and folds for tiny hidden creatures, bedbugs hiding in the smallest cracks, or flea eggs nestled deep in straw and fabric. It was a careful dance, a mix of hope and resignation. Children often watched their elders closely, learning the small tricks, how to pat the bedding in just the right way to stir up any bugs before lying down, or how to spot the faint marks on skin that meant a bite would itch by morning. For those with a bit more means, nightly routines might include sprinkling powdered herbs, lavender, rosemary, mint, into the sheets. Their scent was strong and pleasant, a small comfort, and people believed it discouraged pests from settling in. The air would fill with the earthy smells of dried plants, a hopeful barrier between soft skin and hungry insects. Yet, even the best efforts rarely kept bugs away for long. The creatures were clever, resilient, and always searching for warmth and food. As the candle burned low and the room grew quiet, the invisible world of the bed came alive. Sometimes, the tickle of legs or the faint pinch of a bite woke a sleeper, just enough to roll over and brush at their arm or neck before drifting back to sleep. In the earliest hours, mothers often woke to comfort a child made restless by bites or to soothe a partner's complaints. They whispered gentle words, promising that tomorrow would be better and that the bugs would soon be gone. But everyone knew, deep down, that the next night would bring the same companions. In crowded homes, every bed was shared by many: parents, children, sometimes even grandparents or guests, and always, always the tiny, unseen bugs. The closeness of family brought both warmth and the easy transfer of lice and fleas, who traveled swiftly between bodies and bedding. Despite the discomfort, there was a kind of unspoken acceptance, a recognition that some parts of life could not be fought or changed, only endured. And in this endurance, people found a quiet strength. They shared stories about clever ways to outwit the bugs, or laughed about the most spectacular infestations they had seen. There were even superstitions, little songs and rhymes meant to ward off pests or invite luck into the sleeping room. These became part of the nightly routine, just like checking the mattress or tucking in the blankets. Over time, the nightly dance with bugs became less a source of fear or shame and more a shared story, something everyone, rich or poor, knew well. In the hush before sleep, the presence of bugs was simply part of the landscape, a background hum in a world already full of noise and challenge. Through the ages, people found comfort where they could, in a moment of laughter, a deep breath of herbal air, or the gentle weight of a loved one's hand. Even as the bugs crawled and bit, life went on, slow and steady, guided by the hope that a new day would bring a little more peace and a little less scratching than the night before. The night would settle in with its familiar symphony, the faint creak of timber, a cool draft curling beneath the door, and the almost silent scuffle of something small beneath a blanket. In many ancient homes, people took these sounds as ordinary. They would wrap themselves tightly in their covers, hoping that tonight the bugs might be content to stay hidden. Sometimes, the sense of something moving in the bedding was more imagined than real, yet the mind, alert in the dark, would invent stories to explain each sensation. Children listened wide-eyed to tales their elders told, stories of clever bedbugs outwitting even the wisest housekeepers, or of heroic cats who kept the worst infestations at bay. The presence of a cat, in fact, was considered more than just luck. Cats stalked the floors at night, hunting for mice but often disturbing the habitats of fleas and bugs. In many households, a cat curled at the foot of the bed brought reassurance, even if it sometimes meant sharing space with another source of fur and the occasional scratch. Through all of this, the design of sleeping spaces reflected the ongoing battle with pests. Some families would place their beds away from walls, believing it harder for bugs to reach them if there were open space on all sides. Others elevated the legs of their bed frames in bowls of oil, water, or even ashes, a creative but temporary barrier against crawling invaders. Curtains and canopies became common not only for warmth and privacy, but also as a way to trap bugs or shake them loose before sleep. The heavy drapery added weight to the air, filtering light and muffling sound, but also catching dust and sometimes creating new hiding places for insects. Families passed down wisdom for managing the constant struggle. "Don't let the bedbugs bite," they would say, a phrase that started as practical advice and became a soothing goodnight wish. Remedies were tried and shared. Some people rubbed garlic on bed frames. Others sprinkled salt or ashes between layers of bedding, hoping to irritate bugs into leaving. When infestations grew too severe, it was not uncommon for an entire household to move their sleeping spot for a night or two, letting the pests starve or cool down in their absence. In cities, where homes crowded close together, the movement of bugs was as much a social matter as a personal one. Neighbors would exchange news about particularly bad outbreaks, and word would spread quickly if a family managed to find an effective solution, however temporary. At the same time, shame could linger around a home known to have too many bugs, even though everyone knew the pests played no favorites. In truth, no one escaped the problem for long. The nightly encounters with bugs were an equalizer, touching everyone from peasant farmers to kings in high castles. And so, as the darkness stretched on, people learned to accept the discomfort with a kind of resigned humor, wrapping themselves in blankets and family stories. Through the slow hours until dawn, the gentle persistence of sleep offered its own kind of escape, turning the sounds and sensations of the night into distant memories by morning's first light. Long before the invention of alarm clocks or streetlights, the rhythm of sleep was guided by the natural world. Nights in ancient times were much longer and darker, with only the flicker of a candle, the glow of embers, or a sliver of moon to chase away shadows. In this deep darkness, the quiet drama of the bed played out, a stage where humans and bugs performed their nightly routine. As families prepared for bed, the rituals became almost sacred. Mattresses were shaken, straw fluffed and rearranged, and sheets inspected in the faint light. Children sometimes helped, learning from their elders the small gestures that made sleep just a little easier. A pat here, a shake there, a whispered wish that tonight would be bug-free. Parents tried to hide their own worries, keeping the bedtime mood calm and gentle. The act of settling in for the night became a shared effort, a dance of comfort and vigilance. Yet, even with all this care, the sense of vulnerability remained. There was no way to seal out the world completely. Not from bugs, nor from the cold, nor from the sounds of animals moving in the yard. Sometimes, the beds themselves seemed to pulse with quiet life. The straw, pressed down night after night, shifted beneath each sleeper, creating tiny tunnels and nests for insects to hide. The scent of old grass, mingled with sweat and herbs, filled the air, a smell that meant both safety and discomfort. It was common for people to fall asleep, listening to the tiny clicks and rustles of unseen creatures, the soft breathing of their family, and the distant calls of the night. Some found these sounds comforting, a reminder that they were surrounded by life, both seen and unseen. Others learned to ignore them, focusing instead on the warmth of the blankets and the closeness of loved ones. In wealthier homes, the battle against bugs was waged with more elaborate tools. Servants would air out bedding, hang heavy curtains, and polish bed frames in hopes of keeping pests at bay. Sometimes, entire mattresses were remade, stuffed anew with fresh materials in a seasonal effort to reset the balance. But even in grand homes, the presence of bugs was never fully banished. Their persistence was legendary. Old stories told of bed bugs surviving months without food, hiding deep within carved wood or behind wall hangings. People shared advice in hushed voices, trading recipes for homemade bug repellents, oil mixed with bitter herbs, vinegar sprinkled in the seams, or even crushed chalk dust used to draw invisible lines of defense around a bed. For every new idea, the bugs seemed to find a new hiding place. Over time, people learned to expect the nightly visitations as part of the pattern of life. When sleep finally came, it was precious. A few hours of rest before dawn brought a new day, and the cycle began again. In this way, the ancient world found its own peace, not by defeating the bugs, but by coexisting with them, wrapped in the familiar comfort of shared struggle and the hope that someday sleep would come a little easier. In every region and climate, people tried to adapt their sleeping habits and bedding materials to fight back against the bugs, but the results were always mixed. In hot, humid lands, sleeping mats woven from reeds or palm leaves were popular, laid directly on the floor or over low wooden frames. The cool, hard surface discouraged some pests, but the small gaps in the weave created hiding places for others. In colder areas, mattresses stuffed with straw or dried leaves trapped warmth, but also provided the perfect nesting ground for bugs seeking shelter from the chill. Even the wealthy, who could afford thick feather beds and luxurious blankets, were not immune. Soft down was prized for its comfort, but mites and tiny beetles loved it just as much. Feathers, too, could harbor lice and fleas, and the heat of a sleeping body encouraged eggs to hatch. People would sometimes shake out feather beds in the sunlight, beating them with sticks to loosen dust and bugs. But even this was only a temporary fix. In some places, tradition called for entire beds to be taken apart in the spring and fall, mattresses emptied and refilled, and frames scrubbed with vinegar or lye. The smell of strong soap and drying grass filled the air as families worked together, hopeful that their efforts would buy a few peaceful nights. Yet, the bugs always seemed to return. Through centuries, herbal remedies were passed down from one generation to the next. Sage, mint, rosemary, and lavender were among the favorites, tied in bundles, hung over beds, or tucked under pillows. Sometimes, people even burned herbs before sleep, letting the smoke drift over the bedding in hopes of driving pests away. Old wisdom said that a sprig of wormwood near the mattress could keep the worst bugs at bay, but even this was little more than comfort against the nightly invasion. With every passing year, people became more resourceful. Children learned to check their beds for signs of movement, while adults experimented with different ways to clean and protect their homes. In some cultures, new sleeping inventions appeared. Wooden bed frames with fewer cracks, tightly woven mats, and even attempts to use animal skins or waxed cloth as barriers. But still, the bugs adapted, finding the smallest opening, the slightest bit of warmth. The persistence of these tiny creatures was both a nuisance and a marvel, a reminder that life was everywhere, even in the quietest, most private moments. And so, as night followed day, people settled in, comforted by their routines and the knowledge that they were not alone. The bugs, for all their annoyance, were part of the world, just as much as the sun, the wind, and the rain. The art of sleeping, then, became not just about chasing away discomfort, but about finding peace in spite of it, holding close to loved ones, telling stories by firelight, and trusting that morning would come, bringing another chance to try again. The presence of bugs in ancient beds shaped not just how people slept, but also how they thought about the world around them. Many believed that the nightly invasion of insects was a test of patience or a lesson in humility. Some cultures wove bugs into their folklore, imagining them as mischievous spirits or tiny messengers from the earth, sent to remind people of their place in the natural order. Children listened to bedtime stories where fleas and bedbugs played clever tricks, and parents offered small comforts, a soothing touch on an itchy arm, a whispered promise that tomorrow would be better. In towns and villages, neighbors often helped each other fight back against particularly bad infestations, lending a hand during cleaning days or sharing the last of a favorite herbal remedy. The sense of community extended to the struggle for a good night's sleep. In wealthier households, competition grew over who could keep the cleanest, most bug-free beds. Mattresses were displayed in sunlight, and servants boasted of their skill in finding and removing pests. Still, the results were fleeting. Guests visiting for the night sometimes found themselves scratching at unfamiliar bites, proof that even the grandest homes had their secrets. Over time, the rituals around sleep became more elaborate. In some regions, people took to sleeping in shifts, with one person keeping watch while others rested. This was often as much for safety from animals or intruders as for protection from bugs, but it added a sense of order to the night. Candles were left burning low, casting flickering shadows that seemed to dance with every movement in the bed. Some people recited prayers or incantations, asking for peaceful dreams and an undisturbed night, while others simply trusted in the old habits that had always brought comfort. The deep companionship of family was felt most strongly in these moments, when everyone, from the oldest grandparent to the smallest child, faced the same discomforts together. The sound of a loved one breathing nearby, the warmth of shared blankets, and the gentle weight of a hand resting close by were all reminders that they were not alone in their struggles. Despite the challenges, there was beauty in these quiet hours, a sense of belonging, of perseverance, and of hope that the world, for all its small hardships, was still a place worth resting in. And so, night after night, people lay down to sleep, trusting that whatever else might come, they would meet it together, united by the age-old dance of humans and the tiny creatures that called their beds home. As centuries drifted by, the routines surrounding sleep became more refined, but the underlying reality remained stubbornly unchanged. Bugs were as constant as the moon. Even in the shadowed grandeur of palaces, where silks and velvet draped the beds and golden candlesticks gleamed, the smallest creatures still found their way in. Royalty and nobles, obsessed with hygiene and comfort, sometimes ordered entire bedchambers to be fumigated with pungent smoke or perfumes, hoping to overwhelm the senses of both pests and people. Mattresses were stuffed with down from distant lands, believed to be less attractive to bugs, and servants meticulously beat rugs and aired sheets in the early light. Yet, even after the most diligent preparations, a single night's sleep could reveal new bites, and the slow, determined march of bedbugs from cracks in ancient wood. Those with fewer resources relied on folk wisdom. Some sprinkled salt in the corners of their sleeping space, believing it would form a barrier that crawling insects wouldn't cross. Others stitched sachets of camphor or cloves into the seams of pillows, filling the air with strong, earthy aromas. There were even those who crafted simple bug traps out of bowls of oil placed under bedposts, waking in the morning to find them ringed with tiny casualties of the night. Still, despite the constant battle, sleep remained precious. People clung to their bedtime rituals. Prayers murmured softly, a last check for unwelcome guests, or the sharing of stories that made the world seem gentler, if only for a moment. Children sometimes imagined that the bugs were little guardians, busy patrolling the borders of their dreams. Parents told tales of legendary nights when not a single bite interrupted sleep, a rare miracle, celebrated with laughter over breakfast the next day. The struggle with bugs, while often annoying, shaped a kind of resilience. It taught patience and a sense of humor, reminding everyone that life was full of small troubles and small joys. In communities where people slept close together, the sharing of discomfort also meant the sharing of comfort, a cool hand on a fevered brow, or the soft murmur of encouragement after a restless night. The arrival of new technologies, soap, improved bedding, glass windows, promised a future where sleep would be undisturbed. But, for many generations, those promises remained just out of reach. The old habits lingered, families rising at dawn to carry their bedding into the sun, elders inspecting each corner of the room, and children learning to scratch their bites without complaint. Across every class and culture, the knowledge was the same. Bugs would always return, but so too would morning. In that cycle, people found hope. They learned to see the bugs not only as a nuisance, but as part of the tapestry of life, one thread among many, woven through years of shared struggle and laughter. Night after night they faced the dark together, secure in the knowledge that no hardship lasted forever, and that the promise of a new day, soft and golden, always waited on the other side of sleep. The struggle with bugs in ancient beds wove its way into nearly every aspect of home life, shaping the way families organized their evenings and guarded their precious rest. In villages surrounded by wild fields and forests, nightfall signaled a time of gathering. Families would draw closer, closing doors and windows, tucking curtains and pelts around beds, and checking the corners for signs of tiny intruders. Evenings were spent in the glow of the hearth, with laughter and quiet talk masking the subtle anxiety that came from knowing the night would likely bring another round of scratching and interrupted dreams. Parents became experts at distraction, singing old lullabies or telling stories as they rubbed herbal balms into bites and sprinkled fresh sage or lavender beneath the pillows. Each ritual carried its own hope, its own memory of a night when, perhaps, the bugs had stayed away. In many homes, the bed itself became a fortress, reinforced with every trick the family could devise. Some built makeshift barriers from reeds or scraps of cloth, while others used heavy woven blankets to block the open spaces where bugs might crawl in. Children were taught to shake out their clothes and check their hair before slipping beneath the covers, a nightly inspection that was both practical and oddly comforting. This routine was repeated in cities too, though the nature of the battle changed with the crowded buildings and shared walls. City dwellers contended with infestations that spread swiftly through entire neighborhoods, with bugs slipping between houses through the tiniest cracks, or even traveling in bundles of firewood and market goods. Community efforts sometimes brought everyone together for mass cleanings, with bedding and rugs hanging from every window, and clouds of dust swirling through the streets. Despite all these efforts, the bugs never truly vanished. People learned to accept their presence as an unavoidable part of life. Annoying, yes, but rarely truly dangerous. In fact, in some regions, a bug-free night was so rare that it became a sign of good fortune, a story to share with neighbors and friends. When sleep finally arrived, it was often deep and dreamless, the body and mind too tired from the day's work and the evening's rituals to linger on discomfort for long. The soft breathing of loved ones, the crackle of dying embers, and even the quiet rustle of insects became a familiar lullaby. The world outside was unpredictable, full of wild animals and shifting weather, but inside, families found a fragile peace, wrapped in blankets, and the unspoken knowledge that they could face whatever came together. Over time, these shared struggles gave rise to small moments of triumph, the discovery of a new herb that seemed to work better, a night when no one woke up itching, or the first morning when the sun shone on clean, fresh sheets. Such victories were fleeting but treasured, reminders that even the smallest comforts mattered. And so, the nightly ritual continued, blending hope, humor, and perseverance, as each new generation learned to face the darkness and the bugs with the same quiet courage as those who had come before. As the seasons changed, so did the challenges of keeping beds bug-free. Warm, humid summers brought swarms of mosquitoes and renewed outbreaks of fleas, while damp autumns sent beetles and other crawlers seeking refuge inside homes. Winters, though cold, rarely offered relief. In fact, the close quarters and extra layers of bedding made it even easier for lice and bedbugs to find warmth and a steady food source. Families adapted by rotating their bedding and sometimes even moving their sleeping spots throughout the year, laying straw mats in breezy lofts during hot months, then returning to thick feather beds near the hearth when the frost crept in. Every region developed its own blend of remedies, from aromatic pine needles tucked under blankets in the north to the pungent smoke of burned sage or rosemary in the south. Some people believed that sleeping with certain stones beneath the bed could ward off infestations, while others trusted in the regular use of strong soap or vinegar washes. These customs were part science, part superstition, handed down as family secrets from mother to daughter and father to son. Even so, everyone knew there was no perfect solution, just a set of small defenses that, together, made life a little more bearable. The presence of bugs shaped more than just bedtime rituals. It influenced architecture too. Floors were sometimes raised to discourage ants and beetles, and windows covered with fine screens or layers of linen. Beds with tall, carved posts and thick curtains became both status symbols and practical tools, making it easier to shake out pests or trap them before sleep. In wealthier homes, household staff developed elaborate cleaning routines, often spending hours scrubbing, beating, and airing bedding in a constant effort to keep up with the relentless advance of insects. Yet, for all the differences between rich and poor, city and country, the nightly struggle united people across the ancient world. In every home, the hope for a peaceful night's sleep brought families together, weaving bonds of care and resilience that lasted long after morning arrived. There was a unique intimacy in the act of sharing these discomforts. A shared glance across the room after a particularly loud slap at a mosquito, or a laugh when someone discovered a cluster of ants making their way up the bedpost. These moments, both frustrating and funny, reminded everyone that life's small hardships were easier to bear when faced together. And so, the story of ancient beds was not just one of endless pests and sleepless nights, but also of connection, ingenuity, and hope. Through centuries of adaptation, every generation found new ways to seek comfort in a world alive with hidden life. In the quiet hours before dawn, as the fire faded and the last of the night's bugs found their hiding places, families drifted into dreams, resting in the knowledge that, for all its imperfections, their world was still a place of warmth, togetherness, and the stubborn, enduring search for a better sleep. The memory of those long, bug-filled nights left a subtle mark on the way people approached sleep, even as the world slowly changed around them. With each new century, tools and ideas emerged that promised better rest. A softer mattress, a new type of blanket, a cleverer way to clean a room or seal a window. The arrival of woven linens, cotton ticking, and stronger soaps brought hope that maybe, just maybe, the age-old struggle was coming to an end. Still, the past was never far behind. Even in growing towns where cobbled streets replaced dirt paths and glass panes shut out the wind, the ancient rituals lingered. Families aired their bedding on bright mornings, watched closely for the signs of an infestation, and clung to the folk remedies that had served their ancestors. Grandmothers taught their grandchildren to spot the silver trails of beetles or the black specks left by bedbugs, passing down the quiet wisdom of generations. Bedtime stories still included warnings about scratching too much or ignoring a new bite, because everyone knew that a small problem could quickly become a big one. In this way, knowledge was preserved not in books, but in the soft cadence of nightly conversation and the gentle repetition of familiar gestures. Even as new cures and treatments appeared, people trusted what they learned from each other. For every herbal poultice or fragrant sachet, There was also a trick for tucking in a sheet or shaking out a pillow in just the right way. Sleep became a dance of habit and hope, guided by the invisible presence of bugs and the visible care of family. And while it was easy to feel frustrated, to wonder if true comfort would ever be possible, many found peace in small victories: a night with fewer bites, a successful cleaning day, the laughter that followed an unexpected encounter with a beetle or flea. These moments, brief as they were, helped to build resilience. They taught patience and humility, and fostered a sense of humor about life's inevitable imperfections. For some, the nightly battle even inspired a sense of wonder. Children asked endless questions about where bugs came from, why they liked beds, and how people in faraway lands dealt with the same problems. Adults shared stories about strange remedies or magical charms, always with a wink and a smile. The presence of bugs, for all its inconvenience, reminded everyone that the world was full of surprises, some irritating, some amusing, and all part of the great story of being alive. And so, as the candles burned low and shadows stretched across the walls, people settled in for another night, knowing that whatever the bugs might bring, they would face it together, just as they always had. In the end, the memory of ancient beds alive with unseen life was not just a story of discomfort, but of endurance, connection, and the quiet joy of sharing both troubles and triumphs under the gentle watch of the stars. Even as cities grew busier and new inventions promised relief, the ancient struggle against bugs remained a stubborn part of nightly life. The invention of the mattress tick, a tightly woven cover meant to keep out pests, offered new hope. Families spent extra coins on these fabrics, carefully encasing straw or feathers within their sturdy threads. Yet, the cleverest bugs always found ways to slip inside, nesting deep where no sunlight or cleaning could reach. City dwellers began to trust in more aggressive cleaning, boiling linens, scrubbing bed frames with harsh lye, and fumigating rooms with sharp-smelling herbs or even sulfur smoke. The scents of lavender and rosemary mingled with the tang of vinegar, filling bedrooms with a bittersweet aroma that promised cleanliness. In rural villages, traditions held fast. On certain days of the year, whole communities came together for cleaning festivals. Mattresses and mats were dragged into the open, thumped and shaken in the wind, then left to bake in the sun. Children ran beneath fluttering sheets, chasing the dust and laughter alike. Old women told stories of nights when bugs seemed to vanish, as if scared away by the noise and brightness of a community united in their quest for comfort. Despite these efforts, sleep was rarely perfect. Bugs returned on the backs of travelers or in the seams of second-hand clothes. People learned to be vigilant, inspecting every new blanket or pillow before allowing it in their homes. Markets bustled with sellers offering herbal remedies, sturdy bed linens, and amulets said to ward off pests. Some claimed to possess secrets passed down from wise healers or distant lands, but no one believed there was a true cure. In every home, people built small routines of hope. Before bed, a mother might sprinkle a little salt at the corners of the mattress, or a father might light a sprig of sage, letting the smoke drift through the room. Children learned to brush their hair and check behind their ears for lice, while elders shared advice on how to identify the telltale marks left by bed bugs. These moments, woven into daily life, created a sense of order in a world that could otherwise feel unpredictable and wild. The bugs, for all their persistence, taught people to notice the details: a rustle in the straw, a tiny stain on the sheet, a faint tickle at the edge of sleep. Through it all, families held fast to their traditions. They found comfort in the steady rhythm of bedtime, the soft glow of lamplight, and the warmth of familiar voices. The presence of bugs, though never truly welcome, became a kind of silent companion, a reminder that everyone, from the grandest lord to the humblest farmer, shared the same nightly battle. And as the years passed, people came to see their sleep not just as a quest for rest, but as a quiet triumph of patience and perseverance, a nightly promise that, no matter how many times the bugs returned, the dawn would always bring a new beginning and another chance to find peace between the sheets. In the hush of ancient bedrooms, the nightly drama of bugs played out beneath layers of blankets and straw. The smallest movements, the twitch of a sleeper's hand, the gentle shifting of limbs, were sometimes met with a sudden itch or a tiny pinch, reminders of the invisible life that shared the space. Even as new knowledge about hygiene spread, people found themselves humbled by the resilience of these pests. Science slowly revealed that bedbugs could live for months without feeding, hiding deep in cracks or slipping between the threads of even the tightest linens. Lice, meanwhile, traveled from scalp to scalp with every shared pillow or hug, while fleas leaped effortlessly from pets to people and back again. For centuries, the war against bugs was waged with simple weapons: sunlight, fresh air, and the unflagging energy of a determined household. Each morning, the house would stir with activity. Mattresses dragged to the yard, sheets flapped in the breeze, the rhythmic thump of rugs being beaten echoing down the lane. Children joined in, sometimes just for fun, chasing each other through the swirling dust or pretending to hunt down the most elusive flea. In cities, the fight became a little more organized. Health officials issued pamphlets about keeping bedding clean, and tradespeople offered their services as bugmen, promising to rid a home of pests for a fee. The wealthy hired extra servants to scrub and polish, and public bathhouses gained new popularity as people tried to keep themselves and their clothes as clean as possible. Still, even with these improvements, the bugs always found their way back. The comfort of sleep was never taken for granted. People became philosophical, learning to laugh at their misfortunes. There were jokes about waking up with new roommates, and stories about the cleverest bugs who managed to outwit even the most vigilant housekeeper. A single bite might become the subject of conversation at breakfast, everyone comparing notes on where the pests had struck and which remedy seemed to help most. The discomfort, though real, was rarely enough to ruin the bonds of home. Instead, it became another thread, woven into the fabric of family life, a nightly challenge that united everyone who slept under the same roof. In quieter moments, the presence of bugs was even seen as a kind of lesson, a gentle nudge to care for each other, to remain humble in the face of nature's persistence, and to remember that every creature, no matter how small, had its place in the world. And so, night after night, families pressed on. The bugs crept and crawled, but the voices of loved ones, soft whispers in the darkness, a shared joke, a promise that tomorrow would be better, carried everyone through until morning. In the end, it was this enduring hope, more than any herb or remedy, that made each new day possible. The belief that no matter how crowded or scratchy the night became, dawn would always bring another chance to rest, to dream, and to find comfort together. Even with all their hardships, ancient sleepers learned to find moments of peace amid the nightly battle with bugs. Over time, families developed a deep appreciation for the rare nights when rest came easily, when the sheets felt fresh, and the straw beneath didn't itch, and the only sounds were the steady breathing of loved ones. These brief respites were celebrated with quiet gratitude, for they stood out like small islands in a sea of restless slumber. Many families grew closer because of their shared struggle, comforting each other during the worst outbreaks and taking pride in the simple victories, a night with only a few bites, or a morning when no one woke scratching. Sometimes, children turned the nightly routine into a game, racing to see who could find the most bugs, or inventing stories about brave heroes fighting off armies of fleas. These moments of laughter made the discomfort easier to bear, turning each evening into a mix of duty and play. Storytelling itself became a tool for soothing both body and mind. As the fire burned low, parents told tales that made sense of the unseen world beneath the blankets. Stories of magical herbs with the power to banish pests, or of wise old women who could outsmart even the cleverest bedbugs. Superstitions grew alongside science. It was said that a broom placed beside the bed or a handful of dried mint under the pillow could keep the worst of the bugs away. These small acts of hope persisted, even as people learned more about the true habits of their nightly visitors. Yet, not all remedies were so gentle. In times of severe infestation, desperate measures were sometimes required. Whole rooms might be emptied and scrubbed with boiling water and harsh soap, or mattresses burned and replaced at great expense. Neighbors gathered to help, offering advice, spare linens, or simply a listening ear. The ordeal became a community affair, binding people together in their determination to reclaim a good night's sleep. Through it all, the memory of the bug's persistence became a source of resilience. Each bite or restless night was met with new determination. Each morning brought fresh ideas to try. Some found poetry in the struggle, comparing their battle to the rhythms of nature or the changing of the seasons. Others took a more practical view, treating bugs as just one more challenge to be met with patience, resourcefulness, and the support of family and friends. As the years passed, people saw improvements. Better bedding, cleaner homes, new cleaning techniques, but the lessons of the past remained. The bugs never truly disappeared, and their presence served as a quiet reminder of the world's imperfections. Yet, in every corner of every ancient home, families learned to sleep in spite of the pests, drawing strength from the small comforts of togetherness, hope, and the unshakable belief that dawn would always come, bringing light, warmth, and another chance to rest easy. The world outside ancient homes was full of hazards and noise, but inside, the bedroom remained a place of quiet resilience. Despite the ever-present bugs, people learned to shape their environment as best they could. In some cultures, elaborate wooden headboards and intricately carved bedposts served not only as decorations, but also as practical barriers, making it harder for crawling pests to reach the sleeper. Some beds were suspended from the ceiling with ropes, swinging gently above the floor, a clever, if imperfect, solution that kept at least some of the insects at bay. Others trusted in a nightly sprinkling of ash or a ring of chalk drawn around the bed, believing that the right touch of earth or stone could keep trouble out. In seaside towns, dried seaweed was sometimes tucked into mattresses, its sharp texture and salty smell rumored to drive bugs away. The effort to control the sleeping environment never stopped, and each generation added its own twist to the ongoing struggle. Seasonal chores revolved around keeping beds as clean as possible. The first warm days of spring sent families out to air their bedding, turning every yard and field into a landscape of fluttering sheets and sunlit straw. This great airing was an opportunity to inspect for new infestations, to shake out the dust of winter, and to begin again with the promise of a few bug-free nights. Even after these careful preparations, bedtime remained a moment of uncertainty. Sleepers slipped beneath their covers with a mix of hope and caution, bracing for the familiar itch or tickle. Yet, over time, people developed a certain grace in their acceptance. They learned not to blame themselves for what they couldn't control, and to meet each new bite or restless night with patience rather than anger. There was dignity in the act of enduring, of finding comfort in the soft weight of a blanket or the gentle pressure of a hand in the dark, even as the world remained imperfect. The presence of bugs in the bed became a kind of test, not just of housekeeping, but of character. Families took pride in their ability to face discomfort together, to share laughter when a mosquito evaded every swat, or to encourage a child woken by a bite. In these small, everyday acts, they found a strength that transcended the troubles of the night. Sleep, though never guaranteed to be easy, was cherished for its very fragility. The gentle rituals of bedtime, smoothing the sheets, tucking in a child, offering a whispered blessing, became as important as the sleep itself. And in the quiet moments before dawn, when the world outside was at its stillest, families held on to the hope that their efforts would bring them a little closer to comfort. If not tonight, then soon. The story of ancient beds, then, was not just a tale of bugs and discomfort, but a celebration of endurance, ingenuity, and the enduring human capacity to find peace amid adversity, night after night, for generations on end. As history crept forward and new discoveries changed the way people lived, the nightly struggle with bugs in the bed slowly shifted as well, but it never disappeared entirely. The invention of glass windows, for example, helped keep out many flying pests, and advances in construction meant fewer cracks and gaps for bugs to slip through. Still, no home was ever perfectly sealed, and the oldest wisdoms endured. The first traces of modern pest control, simple powders, sticky traps, and even early chemical repellents, began to appear in city markets. These new inventions brought hope, but most families still relied on the tried and true habits of generations past. Every spring and fall, mattresses were still dragged outside to catch the wind and sun, and children played among fluttering sheets while elders inspected every fold and seam. People traded stories in the marketplace about new herbs or special soaps, eager for even the smallest advantage. For some, there was almost a sense of sport in the contest, a daily test of cleverness and persistence against the tiny adversaries that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Yet, as homes grew cleaner and technology advanced, something subtle changed in the way people thought about bugs. What had once been accepted as an inevitable part of life slowly became a source of frustration or embarrassment. City dwellers in particular began to associate pests with poverty or carelessness, forgetting that no one, rich or poor, was ever truly safe from the occasional invasion. Old remedies, herbal sachets, smoke, salt, were dismissed as superstition by some, even as others clung to them for comfort. In the countryside, where life moved a little slower and traditions lasted longer, people still found beauty in the rituals of cleaning and preparation. There was satisfaction in the careful folding of a freshly laundered sheet, or in the sight of sun-warmed blankets hung out beneath a blue sky. These small joys softened the reality that no bed was ever truly free from the possibility of bugs. Over time, families learned to balance hope with realism, celebrating every peaceful night while accepting the return of pests as simply another cycle in the great turning of seasons. For the children who grew up in this world, the memory of shared beds and whispered stories lingered long after they left home. The quiet hours spent scratching at bites or hunting for hidden bugs became part of the family mythology, a collection of stories told at gatherings, over food and laughter, as proof of the endurance that knit generations together. Some looked back with nostalgia, remembering the closeness of those nights, the sound of rain on the roof, and the comfort of a hand in the dark. Others simply shook their heads, grateful for the progress that made such discomfort less common, if never entirely gone. And so, in the gentle dawn of a new era, the age-old dance continued. People closed their eyes each night with a mixture of trust and caution, holding fast to the rituals of care and comfort passed down through time. The bugs, ever resourceful, remained an unseen thread in the fabric of human life, a small, persistent reminder that even as the world changed, some struggles and the quiet strengths they inspired would always endure. The steady march of progress brought new hope for undisturbed sleep, yet the echoes of ancient struggles lingered in the smallest details of nightly life. In the growing towns and cities of the early modern world, new cleaning tools and stronger soaps promised cleaner homes and fresher beds. People took pride in keeping their bedrooms tidy, sweeping floors, washing linens more often, and experimenting with whatever new products merchants had to offer. The advertisements in newspapers and posted on shop windows promised beds free from bugs and nights of deep, uninterrupted rest. Some families saved up to buy imported chemicals or special powders, carefully dusting them along mattress seams or under bedposts, in hopes of driving the pests away. Others invested in newer styles of bedding, coiled spring mattresses, sealed feather beds, and thick washable blankets, believing that the latest designs would finally keep the bugs at bay. City life meant constant change, and with it came both opportunity and risk. Crowded apartment buildings allowed bugs to travel from home to home with ease. A single infested mattress or blanket left in a hallway could quickly spread trouble through an entire block. Health inspectors visited homes, offering advice or issuing warnings, and public campaigns taught children the importance of cleanliness. In wealthier neighborhoods, servants still beat and aired bedding, and sometimes entire rooms were repainted or fumigated in a battle against the smallest invaders. Yet, in quiet moments, people admitted to themselves that the war was never truly won. There were always stories: a friend who woke with bites on her ankles, a neighbor who had to throw out every mattress in the house, a family who spent a fortune on a new remedy only to see the bugs return a week later. These tales were met with sympathy and a kind of rueful camaraderie, for everyone knew that the line between comfort and discomfort was thin and easily crossed. In rural villages, where the pace of life changed more slowly, traditions endured. Grandmothers still hung lavender and wormwood above the beds, and fathers scattered ashes around sleeping mats before dark. Children helped scrub walls with vinegar or whitewash, learning the old ways, even as they dreamed of something easier. Here, the presence of bugs was less a mark of failure and more a reminder that all living things, great and small, shared the same earth. Family stories took on a gentle humor. Remember the year the bedbugs marched through the attic, or the time cousin Eli found a flea circus in his sheets. The discomfort was real, but so too was the laughter that helped everyone endure. Through all these changes, the meaning of sleep itself deepened. No longer just a time of vulnerability, it became a precious gift, a moment to rest, to heal, and to hope. The nightly rituals, honed over centuries, provided comfort. The careful tucking of sheets, the soft words exchanged before sleep, and the deep sigh of relief that came with closing one's eyes in a world still full of small uncertainties. Even as science brought new understanding and new solutions, the ancient dance continued. People held close to their old wisdoms, adapting them to fit modern life, and in doing so, discovered that resilience and hope were the true bedfellows of every peaceful night. The journey to a restful night remained, in many ways, a testament to humanity's adaptability. Even as modern cities pulsed with electricity and the world outside grew busier with every passing decade, the bedtime rituals rooted in ancient fears persisted behind closed doors. The soft light of a lamp replaced the flicker of a candle, yet the careful inspection of sheets, the airing out of blankets, and the tapping of pillows with an open hand continued in bedrooms, from rural cottages to city apartments. Parents taught their children to spot the telltale dots of a bedbug or the silvery trail of a beetle, just as their own elders had done. In these small lessons, families passed down not only practical wisdom, but also the reassurance that even the most stubborn discomforts could be managed together. The line between old and new blurred as synthetic fibers began to replace straw and feathers. Foam and polyester promised resistance to bugs, and for a time many believed that science had finally triumphed over the centuries-old nuisance. Yet, the tiny invaders adapted in turn, finding new places to hide or new ways to travel from place to place. Airplanes and trains, hotels and hostels, all offered the bugs fresh opportunities to spread, and the story of their persistence entered the modern imagination. News headlines warned of outbreaks in the world's grandest cities, and online forums buzzed with advice from travelers and homemakers alike. The battle became less about outright victory and more about vigilance, with families arming themselves with sprays, mattress covers, and ever-evolving routines. Technology added its own layer of comfort and complexity. Washing machines and vacuum cleaners made cleaning easier, while smartphones brought instant answers to late-night worries about mysterious bites or odd stains. Even so, the feeling of waking to an unexpected itch, or the sight of a tiny bug scurrying across a sheet, was as familiar in the 21st century as it had been in the first. The resilience that carried ancient sleepers through countless restless nights continued to shape lives, fostering a kind of quiet pride. People learned to laugh at the absurdity of their predicament, to share stories with friends, and to approach each new challenge with the confidence born of history. For every sleepless night there was a memory of comfort, a favorite pillow, the warmth of a pet curled close, or the soothing sound of rain against the window. These simple pleasures became anchors, reminders that life was always a balance between irritation and ease, trouble and relief. In this way, the old wisdom endured. Take comfort where you find it, face discomfort with patience, and trust that the dawn will bring new chances for rest. And so, As night after night unfolded, whether in silence or in the gentle chorus of city life, families everywhere tucked themselves in with the hope that, even if the bugs returned, they would do so to a home rich with humor, resilience, and the kind of love that made every struggle a little bit lighter. By the modern era, the story of bugs in the bed was no longer just a personal struggle, but a shared chapter in the world's history, a quirky footnote in the tale of progress, and yet still a real concern in countless households. Science had explained the habits of bed bugs, fleas, lice, and mites, and companies produced a dizzying array of sprays, powders, and traps, each one promising to solve the age-old problem once and for all. Yet, in bedrooms from New York to New Delhi, the evening ritual still carried echoes of the past. Many people grew expert at spotting the faint traces left by bedbugs, a tiny smear on a sheet, the faintest musty smell, or the minute, rust-colored spots along a mattress seam. The advice passed from neighbor to neighbor was as old as time. Clean thoroughly, air bedding in the sun, and never let clutter pile up around the bed. Travelers swapped stories of bed-bug-proof suitcases and checked hotel mattresses before unpacking, while parents gave their children a crash course in vigilance before sleepovers or school trips. News cycles would occasionally erupt with reports of outbreaks in major cities, and suddenly the world would remember that the ancient adversaries had never truly left. Still, the tone had shifted. What once inspired dread or resignation now often became a source of humor, commiseration, and even a strange sort of pride. People shared stories of their bedbug wars, recounting the lengths they'd gone to reclaim their peace, freezing blankets on a balcony in winter, steam cleaning every seam and crevice, or sleeping with the lights on for a week. Each tale, though rooted in discomfort, also revealed resilience, ingenuity, and an unbroken spirit. The bugs, in a way, became just another challenge in the tapestry of life, no different from the traffic outside, the neighbor's loud TV, or the uncertainties that came with each new day. Meanwhile, families continued to find comfort in the familiar, the cool, smooth feel of clean sheets, the sense of security in a well-made bed, the comfort of a bedtime story whispered in the dark. In many ways, the nightly ritual of preparing for sleep, checking, tidying, soothing, was as much about creating a sense of safety as it was about fighting off bugs. The rituals brought a moment of order and calm, a space where worries could be set aside and rest could begin. For those who still woke to an unexpected itch or the sight of a tiny visitor, the frustration was real, but so too was the knowledge that they were not alone. The ancient truth persisted. Everyone, no matter how modern their home or advanced their technology, was bound together by the timeless desire for a peaceful night's sleep. As dusk fell and lights winked on across the world, millions tucked themselves in with hope, humor, and the quiet determination to face whatever the night would bring. In this way, the story of bugs in the bed remained, if not a tale of triumph, then a story of endurance, adaptation, and the gentle art of finding comfort wherever and whenever it could be found. In the great mosaic of human history, the humble bed and its nightly visitors played a role that few would expect, a silent, persistent thread running through every era, connecting the simplest huts to the grandest palaces. As cities reached for the sky and technology promised ever greater comfort, the tiny bugs that once tormented ancient sleepers continued their quiet migration from one generation to the next. In gleaming modern apartments, The click of a laptop or the glow of a phone screen became part of the bedtime ritual, yet the oldest habits endured alongside the newest ones. It was not uncommon to see a parent, phone in hand, inspecting the seams of a child's mattress or pausing to brush a stray crumb from the sheets. Bedtime remained a blend of vigilance and routine, a careful straightening of blankets, a quick glance at the corners, a soft word of reassurance as lights were dimmed. For many, the presence of a bug was a nuisance, a story to share over morning coffee, but rarely a disaster. The tone of the conversation had changed. What once brought shame or secrecy now often inspired camaraderie. People swapped tips on the best steam cleaners, compared notes on the merits of essential oils, or even joked about the, quote, household guests who seemed immune to every trick. In hotels and hostels, travelers formed a silent fellowship, armed with pocket flashlights and plastic bags, united by the hope that tonight's bed would be trouble-free. Social media added a new twist. Photos of bite marks, triumphant captures, and late-night questions to strangers around the globe. Beneath the surface, however, the old lessons still rang true. Cleanliness and order, the wisdom of sunlight and fresh air, the value of checking twice. All these habits had stood the test of time. Scientists continued to study the life cycles and hiding spots of bed bugs, while engineers designed new textiles and mattress covers in the endless quest for a pest-proof sleep. Yet, for all the innovation, the most enduring comfort was found in human connection. The laughter shared after a restless night, the comfort of a partner's hand on a troubled shoulder, the quiet reassurance given to a child woken by an itch. These moments brought more peace than any product ever could. As the world spun on, each night brought its own small drama. A sleepless hour might be met with a cup of tea and a good book, a day's irritation soothed by a cool shower, or the promise of clean sheets tomorrow. Families kept alive the art of resilience, finding beauty in the glow of a bedside lamp, warmth in the tangle of blankets, and hope in the simple act of turning out the light. And so, the ancient story played on, changing shape but never truly ending. The bugs remained, annoying, enduring, and oddly familiar, but so too did the human spirit, rising each morning with a renewed determination to rest, dream, and carry forward the gentle rituals that made even the most imperfect night a little bit brighter. In the tapestry of nightly life, every small victory over the bugs became a cherished memory, a story to be retold, a lesson for future generations, and sometimes even a badge of honor. The persistence of bedbugs and their kin served as a quiet reminder that nature always finds a way, and that comfort, though hard-won, is never guaranteed. Yet rather than giving in to frustration, most people met this challenge with an adaptable spirit. The stories of the past, the matron beating a mattress in the sun, the grandfather airing feather beds on the porch, the mother sprinkling lavender in a hopeful line across the pillow, remained alive in the rituals of the present. Modern families still gathered their bedding for a spring cleaning, still watched with satisfaction as sheets dried in the breeze, still taught their children to shake out a blanket before sleep. In these acts there was both nostalgia and renewal, a link to ancestors who had weathered the same nightly trials. Science, for all its advances, became another ally in this ancient struggle. Researchers discovered new ways to detect infestations early, invented heating systems and chemical treatments that could clear a room overnight, and developed textiles that were harder for bugs to penetrate. Professional exterminators offered guarantees that would have sounded magical to those living centuries ago. Still, everyone knew that vigilance mattered most, that even the most determined efforts might need to be repeated, and that the next guest, the next suitcase, the next warm season could bring the cycle around again. Through it all, the culture of storytelling remained strong. People laughed about their midnight bug hunts, traded stories of surprise encounters, and marveled at the resilience of such tiny foes. In some households, an old goodnight rhyme survived. Sleep tight, don't let the bedbugs bite. A phrase spoken with a mix of humor and hope, its origins stretching back into the shadows of history. The phrase was more than superstition. It was an expression of solidarity, a way to say, "You're not alone, and tomorrow will be better." The act of turning out the light, then, was more than the end of a day. It was a renewal of faith, a promise that comfort and rest could still be found amid uncertainty. Even the frustration of a sleepless, itchy night became part of the story that bound people together. The memory of old struggles deepened the appreciation of small comforts, the delight of slipping into crisp, fresh sheets, the quiet joy of a bed undisturbed, the sense of security in a home kept warm, tidy, and well-loved. In this way, the long history of bugs in the bed was transformed from a tale of hardship into one of resilience, adaptation, and the enduring strength of family and community. The night remained imperfect, but hope never faded. Each dawn brought new opportunities for rest, new chances to laugh, and the gentle assurance that, for all the challenges faced in the dark, the human spirit would always find a way to greet the morning with peace, gratitude, and the determination to try again. The world outside might be unpredictable and full of change, but inside, the familiar rhythms of bedtime provided a kind of shelter, a place where both old anxieties and new comforts lived side by side. In this intimate space, families shared not just the struggle against bugs, but also the small joys that made life rich. The warmth of shared blankets on a cold night, the hush of a quiet house as everyone drifted to sleep, the whispered dreams and private hopes spoken in the dark. Across time and cultures, these moments offered stability even as the world spun on, and each new generation added its own chapter to the story. The presence of bugs in the bed, once accepted with resignation, gradually became less common, thanks to innovation and vigilance. Yet the lessons learned from centuries of discomfort did not fade. People knew to be grateful for comfort, to take nothing for granted, and to face small troubles with a sense of humor. In crowded city apartments and quiet country homes alike, the evening routines reflected this wisdom. A quick check for crumbs or stains, the habit of washing sheets regularly, the careful sealing of windows and doors. For those who still faced an outbreak, frustration was mixed with practical resolve. A new round of cleaning, a call to an exterminator, a weekend spent laundering everything in sight. Children listening to parents discuss bugs or watching as mattresses were inspected picked up the old habits, learning not just the importance of cleanliness, but the art of adapting to whatever the world might bring. The story of ancient beds lived on in small ways, shaping how people thought about rest, resilience, and the value of home. There was a sense of connection that transcended time, knowing that a scratchy night's sleep was a challenge faced by kings and peasants alike, and that hope for a peaceful night was universal. Even the language of comfort carried echoes of the past. Good night wishes, the soft reassurance that everything is all right, and the gentle laughter at each day's small mishaps. As science advanced and comforts multiplied, it would have been easy to forget the hard lessons of the past. Yet, people held on to them, recognizing that true rest depended as much on mindset and companionship as on technology. A warm embrace, a favorite pillow, or the quiet confidence that tomorrow would be better. These simple gifts mattered as much as any invention. And so, as the world's lights flickered out one by one and millions prepared for sleep, the ancient dance continued. A story not just of bugs and beds, but of patience, community, and the quiet triumph of hope over discomfort. Night after night the struggle persisted, but so did the joy, the gratitude, and the unbreakable spirit that turned even the scratchiest bed into a place of rest, renewal, and belonging. As the story of beds and bugs neared its latest chapter, it became clear that this nightly battle was more than a nuisance. It was a symbol of the human journey itself. In every culture, people had learned to meet discomfort with creativity and patience. Even as beds grew softer and rooms more secure, the possibility of a restless night lingered as a gentle reminder that life is never perfectly under our control. The old wisdom persisted. Laugh when you can, help each other when needed, and don't let small troubles overshadow the comfort that's within reach. Parents continued to soothe their children's fears, promising that a few bug bites were nothing to worry about, that every problem could be managed together. These reassurances weren't just for the children, they were for everyone, a way of passing on courage and calm, generation to generation. The rituals endured. Windows opened to let in fresh air, sheets hung out beneath the sun, bedtime stories told to ease the mind and lift the spirit. In the hum of a city or the quiet of the countryside, families found the same sense of satisfaction in the simple act of making a bed, of setting the room right before sleep. This focus on care, of self, of others, of the home, became a daily meditation, a small but powerful act of gratitude for all that was good, even in a world that could be scratchy and imperfect. The presence of bugs was no longer a mark of shame or failure, but just another part of the story, like a rainy day or a missed bus, something to be managed, joked about, and ultimately overcome. Communities came together in moments of need, whether for a neighborhood cleaning, a shared purchase of supplies, or a comforting conversation after a bad night. In these moments, people found strength not only in their efforts but in each other, knowing that the real remedy for any discomfort was connection. As the years slipped by and technology offered ever more impressive solutions, the heart of the struggle stayed the same: the search for peace in the dark, for trust that tomorrow would be better. Sleep, after all, is a leap of faith, the belief that, despite all that creeps and crawls, the night is a place of rest, dreams, and renewal. The bugs, for all their persistence, could never take that away. So each night, as families everywhere settled into their beds, they did so with the quiet certainty that while problems may always exist, so too will the comfort of home, the laughter of loved ones, and the unending hope that carries us all through the shadows and into the gentle light of morning. And so, across centuries and continents, the quiet drama of bugs in the bed, once a source of dread, then of humor, and always of shared experience, became a reminder of what truly matters when the world goes dark. The ancient routines, shaped by need and tradition, endured even as the details changed. A flick of a blanket here, a shake of a pillow there, a careful check for unwanted visitors before climbing under the covers. With each new era, People found new ways to cope, yet the meaning behind the nightly rituals stayed the same. It was never just about keeping bugs away. It was about making space for comfort, connection, and a moment's peace in a busy world. The bed, in all its forms, from straw mats in thatched cottages to plush mattresses in high-rise apartments, became a symbol of hope and resilience. Even on the scratchiest, most restless nights, families learned to draw strength from each other. A soothing touch, a gentle word, the shared laughter that followed a night of chasing elusive pests. Sleep itself became an act of trust, a letting go of the day's worries and the acceptance that perfection, in rest as in life, is not always possible. The bugs were still out there, and sometimes, despite every effort, they found their way back. Yet, the victories, however small, were celebrated. A morning without new bites, a week of peaceful dreams, the comfort of sunlight on clean sheets. These moments became stories, woven into the fabric of family life, retold with pride, amusement, or a soft sigh of relief. The struggles with bugs, though persistent, revealed the greater truth, that comfort is created, not found, that patience, humor, and love are the true guardians of the night. In facing these tiny adversaries, people discovered the value of ritual, the healing power of togetherness, and the unbreakable hope that tomorrow's sleep will always be a little sweeter. And as dawn crept in, first a pale blue glow at the window, then the gentle warmth of sunlight touching the walls, the world awoke, ready to try again. The beds were straightened, stories exchanged, and plans made for another night's rest. In this endless cycle, the lessons of the past continued to guide the present. Keep your bed clean, cherish the small comforts, and remember that no struggle is faced alone. Through generations, this simple wisdom endured, lighting the darkness with reassurance and filling the silence with the quiet certainty that, bugs or no bugs, each night offers the possibility of peace, and each new morning a chance to begin again, together.